Community Activities Centre in Thomastown, as a number of us have been impacted by COVID-19 and or are required to self-isolate. I'm Lydia Wilson, Chair of Council, and I'd also like to introduce my colleague, Administrator Peter Duncan.
Good evening, everybody.
And could I also note that we have an apology this evening from Administrator Chris Eddy as he's unwell. While we'll be live streaming the council meeting, I am pleased to at least note that the community forum and associated events that were scheduled at Barry Road still did go ahead. And I'm very grateful to my colleague Peter Duncan and members of the executive leadership team and other staff for flying the flag and being able to engage with community members at Barry Road. So thank you, Peter, and everyone else for all of your endeavours there. I'd now like to introduce our Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Craig Lloyd, and ask that he in turn introduce members of the executive leadership team in attendance this evening.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. And unfortunately, I'm one of those that succumbed to COVID, and I'm currently isolating myself. So with us tonight, we have our Director of Community Wellbeing, Ms. Kate McCackey, our Director of Planning and Development, Mr. Justin O'Mara, Interim Director of Corporate and Shared Services, Ms. Marilyn Kearney, Strategy, Mr. Frank Joyce, and our Executive Manager of Public Affairs, Ms. Janine Morgan. Almighty God, we ask for your blessing upon this council to make informed and good decisions to benefit the people of the city of Whittlesea. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive them that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. Before we begin, on behalf of the City of Whittlesea, I recognise the rich Aboriginal heritage of this country and acknowledge the Wurundjeri Willem clan as the traditional owners of this place. And I'd also like to personally acknowledge elders past, present and emerging. We do have a number of acknowledgements that we would like to make this evening, and perhaps if I could firstly acknowledge 4 City of Whittlesea residents who were recently recognised in the Queen's Birthday 2022 Honours List. The first resident is Mrs. Beryl Patullo, and she is the recipient of a medal in the General Division, OAM, for service to the community through a whole range of roles, including being a member of the Whittlesea Historical Society and Aurora Support Services, Whittlesea Neighbourhood Watch Group, and authoring the booklet 130 Years of Schooling, History of Thomastown Primary School 1855 to 1985. Congratulations to Mrs. Patullo. The second recipient of the Queen's Birthday recognition was Mr. Lindsay Patullo, and he is also a recipient of a medal in the General Division, OAM, for service to the community through a range of roles, including being President and Committee Member of Aurora Support Services, which was formerly Whittlesea Helping Hand Association. And again, we congratulate Mr. Patullo. Mr. Trevor Carroll is the recipient of a medal in the General Division, again OAM, for service to people with disability, including various roles for Disabled Peoples International, Australian Federation of Disability Organisations, Victoria Policy Disability Portfolio Reference Group, and Friends of South Morang. Mr. Carroll has also been involved in the City of Whittlesea Australia Day Committee and the Whittlesea Disability Network, and is a former City of Whittlesea Access and Inclusion Citizen of the Year recipient. And we really congratulate Mr. Carroll, who's well known to Council and has provided absolutely fantastic advocacy on behalf of people with disabilities. The final recipient is Mr. John Cowan, who is a recipient of the Australian Fire Service Medal, AFSM. He has distinguished his contribution to the Country Fire Authority and the community throughout his 43 years of service. Mr. Cowan is an accredited Level 3 planning officer and has performed this role at extremely large and prolonged campaign fires. Mr. Cowan is highly regarded by leaders across the emergency management sector within Victoria, and again, we congratulate Mr. Cowan. On behalf of Council, we want to formally congratulate all of our residents, and we will be sending a letter of acknowledgement on behalf of Council, and we also do hope to host a small celebratory function in the very near future. Administrator Duncan, I believe you have another acknowledgement this evening.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would like to acknowledge the Parks and Leisure Australian VicTAS Award that the City of Whittlesea has won. And on June the 9th, the City of Whittlesea won the Parks and Leisure Australia Award for Community-Based Initiative of the Year for our Muslim Women's Get Into Golf program. This program was delivered by the City of Whittlesea and Golf Australia and supported by Al Sarat Islamic College and the Growling Frog Golf Course. It has enabled Muslim women to be active, build friendships and engage in their community throughout the pandemic recovery. With this award, we will now be considered for the National Community-Based Initiative to be considered by the National Community Award later this year. But a very big shout out to thank you to our Leisure and Rec team, especially Megan Harper, our Leisure Inclusion Officer. And she led this project throughout, and Stephanie Rizveska and Konstanantu from the Aging Well team, who've also provided support. So well done to the team and congratulations.
Thank you, Ms. Duncan. I echo your sentiment, and let's hope that we also have some further success at the national level. Just two further acknowledgements this evening. It is a further promotion of our important community leadership program. For people who might be interested in council into the future or who would like to make a difference through community groups and hone their leadership skills, this program aims to build our participants' practical leadership skills and get them ready for future leadership roles and duties. So for the City of Whittlesea, it's important for us to build leadership capacity in the community ahead of the return to elected representatives in 2024. And the selection of participants aims to reflect the diversity of the city. So we really encourage people of all ages, over 18, genders, abilities and cultural backgrounds to apply. Having had a look at the course details, it's very sophisticated. It's an excellent leadership program with elements that are developed and coordinated by La Trobe Business School and also by the Victorian Local Governance Association. Applications for our next intake close on Monday, the 25th of July, so there's still time for applications. And if people go to our website, www.whittlesea.vic.gov.au/leading-change, you can find out more and hopefully put in an application. My final acknowledgement this evening is in relation to two local members who have been elevated in their roles. Firstly, our federal member for Scullin, Mr. Andrew Giles MP, has a new role as Minister for Immigration, Citizenship and Multicultural Affairs. And secondly, we'd also like to acknowledge Mr. Colin Brooks, MP, member for Bundoora, who has just been announced as our new Minister for Child Protection and Family Services and Minister for Disability, Ageing and Carers. So congratulations to Andrew Giles and Colin Brooks. Thank you. I note that Administrator Eddie, as I indicated earlier, is an apology. Administrators Duncan and myself, if you have a conflict of interest in any item on the notice paper, you may verbally disclose the type and nature of the interest now, but you must make a declaration immediately before consideration of the matter in question. Are there any items for which you have a conflict of interest to declare, Administrator Duncan?
No, Chair.
And I also have no interest to declare, conflict of interest to declare. I seek a motion to confirm the minutes of the following preceding meeting, which is the scheduled meeting of Council held on the 16th of May 2022.
Yes, Chair, I'm happy to move that.
Thank you, Ms Duncan, and I'm happy to second the confirmation of minutes, and I'll now put the matter to a vote. All those in favour of confirming the minutes? The motion is carried. If we now move to Council's public question time, I note that we've had no public questions received in advance for this Council meeting. But I will just again confirm with Mr Joyce whether any community members at Barry Road have submitted any questions.
Thank you, Chair. There were no public questions submitted at the community forum this morning. There was a petition which I believe Administrator Duncan will speak to later.
Thank you, Mr Joyce. So we will now move on to petitions and joint letters. So we had one petition that had been previously tabled, and I understand, Mr Joyce, that we've got the further petition that was provided to you this evening. So perhaps if we could deal with the first petition, which is from 14 residents requesting that gum trees on Eagle's Nest and part of Corella Drive be removed and replaced. The lead petitioner has advised that they will not be in attendance at the meeting today. Ms Duncan, do you have any questions in relation to this particular petition?
No, Chair.
If not, I'm happy to table the petition and I will actually move to resolve the following, and I will read it out, but also note that there is an amendment to part 3 of the motion, which we've previously provided to Mr Joyce, which relates to the date. So the motion is that Council note the petition from 14 residents requesting Council replace gum trees in Eagle's Nest and part of Corella Drive, Whittlesea, and write to the signatories to inform them that 1, the trees along both streets have recently been assessed and comply with the City of Whittlesea's street tree management plan. 2, a meeting with the head petitioner will be organised with the Director Infrastructure and Environment or representative on site to understand their concerns and specific rationale for their request. 3, a report to Council will be prepared for the September 2022 Council meeting, advising how the petitioner's concerns have been addressed in consultation with Director Infrastructure and Environment. And 4, signatories will be advised of Council's decision following the August Council meeting. Do I have a seconder to that motion?
Yes, Chair.
Excuse me, Administrator Wilson. I'm just wondering if the point 4 should also be following the September Council meeting.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Mr Joyce. That is a good pickup. So if part 4 could be amended to also include the date September instead of August. Thank you. With that change, could I have a seconder?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. I'll now put that motion to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Administrators, Administrator Duncan, we're now going to work through the agenda, and we've obviously got a very large...
Excuse me, Chair, I need to read my petition.
Oh, sorry, Ms Duncan. This is the second petition that was tabled this evening. Sorry, Ms Duncan. Please do.
I'm pleased to table a petition received tonight from a local grade 6 student who's obtained 237 signatures in relation to requesting that council have education programs regarding the dangers of cigarette butt litter and to put up cigarette butt bins around parks, shopping centres and schools in our council. Are there any questions, Chair?
No, I have none. Thanks, Ms Duncan.
Okay, so I move to resolve that Council 1 note the petition from 237 residents requesting council have education programs regarding the dangers of cigarette butt litter and to put up cigarette butt bins around parks, shopping centres and schools in our municipality. 2, officers will contact the lead petitioner to inquire about council locations where there are significant cigarette butts so that the litter enforcement team can take urgent action to address this issue. 3, a report to council be prepared for the September council meeting, advising how the petitioner's concerns have been addressed. And 4, advise the lead petitioner of council's decision following the September council meeting.
Thank you, Ms Duncan, and I'm happy to second the motion. Ms Duncan, would you like to speak to the motion any further?
No, no, thank you, Chair. I just would like to thank our grade 6 student who came to the community gathering tonight to put this petition in.
Thank you, Ms Duncan. So I'll now put that motion to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you. I will now move us into general business and I will note that, as I started to say earlier, we've got a very large agenda with some key strategic reports and documents for resolution. So if we move into the first item, which is 5.1.1, which is the Community Plan Action Plan 2022 to 2023 draft for adoption. And if I could ask our Executive Manager, Governance and Strategy, Mr. Frank Joyce, to introduce this particular item.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really delighted to introduce this item. There's been a lot of work following consultation with the community to get to the final version of the plan we're putting forward to Council to adopt today. I would like to introduce Robert Kifchin, the Unit Manager, Corporate Planning and Improvement, to provide an overview of the Officer recommendation and report.
Thank you, Mr. Joyce.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Joyce. It's my pleasure to present the Draft Community Plan Action Plan 2022-2023 tonight. The Draft Action Plan is part of the Community Plan 21 to 25, and that really is Council's strategic roadmap over the Council term over the 4 years. It includes the goals, the key directions, the key initiatives, and the valued community services that are really at the heart of the program of delivery that Council stands for, and that really has the improvement of community outcomes at its very heart. We're now approaching the end of the first year of the council term, and hence we're looking at finalising the action plan for year 2, which is going to take us from July 2022 through to June 2023. Now, the draft action plan that we're considering tonight includes 125 key actions across our 5 goals, and those goals are a connected community, a livable neighborhood, a strong local economy, a sustainable environment, and a high-performing organization. And it's a really exciting breadth of actions that are included in this plan. And just to name a few of those, the community leadership program that we've already raised just earlier, our investment into mental health advocacy as well as service delivery, a really strong focus on open space infrastructure, road infrastructure, and community infrastructure, and that includes items such as the Aboriginal Gathering Place, as well as the Regional Aquatics and Sports Centre in Mernda. It also looks at key investment into our employment precincts, in particular in the western suburbs, the development corridor there, and that really has at its heart the growth of our local jobs in the municipality. In the sustainable environment space, we've got the implementation of a glass bin recycling service, and more broadly, we've got a place-based service delivery model and strengthening that across council. So that's really just a snapshot of some of those initiatives in the plan. The community has been broadly involved in the development of this plan, starting really from the broader 4-year consultation period, February 21. And most recently, we've received 14 submissions on the draft action plan. And I would really like to take the opportunity and thank everyone from the community who's been providing this really thoughtful and considered feedback with regards to this plan. It's really great to see how positive submitters feel about the plan that we've got in the pipeline here. And the Community Plan Advisory Committee considered the submissions at the meeting on the 6th of June, and they have made recommendations with regards to in response to the submissions. And the next step really here is following a couple of updates to the plan as a result that at tonight's meeting, I would like to put forward the recommendations that the Council notes the Community Plan Advisory Committee's recommendations in response to the submissions received regarding the draft Community Plan Action Plan 22 and 23. And 2, that the Council adopts the Community Plan Action Plan 22-23, which has been updated following consideration of the submissions received during the consultation period. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kisjan. Ms. Duncan, do you have any questions relating to this item?
No, Chair.
I also don't have any questions, but I'm very happy to move the officer recommendation for item 5.1.1. Do I have a seconder, Ms. Duncan?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. If I could just make a few comments, and Mr. Kisjan, thank you very much for that really comprehensive summary in relation to the Community Plan Action Plan. I think you highlighted a number of the key new initiatives that are embedded within the plan. I also just wanted to note that administrators had the opportunity to speak to the draft community plan when we resolved to place the plan on public exhibition, which was at the council meeting in March. So I'm not proposing that I replicate the comments I previously made. I just want to make a couple of further comments. I echo Mr. Kisjan's appreciation to the community members who put in responses during our public consultation period. And I also noted that most of the 14 submissions in response, a number of them were broadly supportive of the plan or proposed some suggested areas for refinement. And for me, there were no surprises from the submission in relation to some of the key themes that came forward, because we're well aware that they are issues for the Whittlesea municipality, things including road and open space infrastructure. Mr. Kisjan mentioned the Regional Sports and Aquatics facility and the Aboriginal Gathering Place. Libraries are of deep concern and dear to everyone's heart, youth services and the arts. I just want to note that the full list of submissions received and a really comprehensive summary of the issues that they've identified within the submissions is appended to the officer report together with the committee response to each of those. And as Mr. Kisjan indicated, the committee comprised of 3 administrators. So my final comments are really just appreciation to the council officers who have put so much effort into the development of the draft plan. I think it's an absolutely excellent document. To you, Mr. Joyce, and to you, Mr. Kisgen in particular, for leading what is a comprehensive cross-organisational and really comprehensive consultation and engagement process. Well done, because I think, as I say, it's a really excellent document that I'm very proud of. So thank you. Ms. Duncan?
Thank you, Chair. I concur with all of the comments that you've made, and yes, congratulations to all the officers who were involved in this plan. And as you've already said, thank you so much to the community, because it's very important we do get your views, and we have done that. And you will note that we've got 125 actions to be delivered in the next financial year. And I think all of those actions are spot on after having consultation with the community to deliver some really great outcomes for everybody. So well done to everybody.
Thank you, Ms. Duncan. So I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you again. Item 5.1.2, Belgravia Leisure Contract Extension. And if I could invite our Director of Community Wellbeing, Ms. Kate McCackey, to provide an introduction to this item. Ms. McCackey? Mr. Lloyd, I wonder whether I should just perhaps hand over to Mr. Trail if he would like to do an introduction to this item.
Yes, certainly, Chair. Mr. Trail is there, so we'll hand straight over to Mr. Trail, the manager in that area.
Thank you.
Thank you now as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you, Chair. In December 2021, Council resolved to extend our leisure contracts for Thomastown Recreation Aquatic Centre, Mill Park Leisure and Whittlesea Swim Centre. The revised budgets have been sourced to factor impacts of COVID-19 pandemic that has been obtained from our contractor, assessed and recommended to Council tonight in the form of a guaranteed sum and a non-guaranteed sum if projections and visitation increase above expected. I'll hand over to you, Chair, for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Trail. Ms. Duncan, have you got any questions? No?
No, Chair.
No, if there are no questions, Mr. Trail, obviously we've already had a number of briefings on this item, so I'm happy to move the officer recommendation for item 5.1.2, but with an additional part 5, which we have provided to Mr. Joyce earlier. And if I could perhaps just read the part 5, which is the amendment to this recommendation, or part 3, undertakes further community engagement, research and evaluation in relation to the issue of potential free swim entry at Whittlesea Swim Centre to be completed as part of contract specification development in 2023-2024. Do I have a seconder? Ms. Duncan, thank you. Perhaps if I could just very briefly speak to this item. As Mr. Trail indicated, clearly pandemic restrictions have had a major impact on leisure membership and visitations over the past couple of years. And while things are certainly turning in the right direction, this has clearly impacted on revenues. And I just want to note in relation to that new part 3, the council officer report indicates that there needs to be further exploration of that concept of free entry to Whittlesea Swim Centre as part of the development of the new specification which will be undertaken in 2023-2024. And I just felt it was important to capture that specific aspect that is contained within the report by way of council resolution. Ms Duncan, would you like to speak to this item?
No, thank you, Chair. It's fairly straightforward.
Thank you. So I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion's carried. Thank you, Mr Trail. Item 5.2.1, proposed amendment to the Mayfield Historic Precinct Development Plan. And if I now could introduce Mr Justin O'Mara, who is our Director of Planning and Development. Thank you, Mr O'Mara.
Thank you, Chair. And I would like to introduce Linda Martin-Chu, who's our Coordinator of Strategic Land Use Planning, who's going to provide a brief overview of this report and recommendation. Over to you, Linda.
Thank you, Mr O'Mara. This report makes a recommendation for Council to refuse an amendment proposed to the Mayfield Historic Precinct Development Plan. The proposal would amend the development plan to allow the use and development of a childcare centre at 1325 Plenty Road, Mernda, which is one of 3 sites forming the development plan area. The development plan sets out the form and conditions for future subdivision, land use and development for the precinct, and currently designates this site for education or residential use. The Mayfield Historic Precinct is located within a well-established residential area in Mernda. The former Mernda Primary School and Schoolmasters' residence are located on the subject site at 1325 Plenty Road. To the south, 1321 Plenty Road contains a 19th century bluestone former inn known as the Poplars. To the north, 1345 Plenty Road contains a 19th century bluestone Mernda Presbyterian Church. The 3 sites are protected by a heritage overlay, and individual heritage overlays affect the Mernda Presbyterian Church site to the north, as well as the subject site. The heritage citations reference the importance of maintaining sight lines between the heritage elements across the site. The key features of the proposed amendment to the development plan are minor demolition and extension of heritage buildings to facilitate the use of the site as a childcare centre. A single-storey childcare centre would be constructed at the rear of the former schoolhouse to accommodate 128 children and would include associated staff facilities, kitchen, laundry, meeting room, wash facilities and reception. 28 car spaces, including tandem car parking, would be provided in the west portion of the land to the rear of the schoolhouse, with vehicle access to the site provided via vehicle crossovers to the yet-to-be-constructed players' place at the rear of the site. External play areas are proposed to the north, east and west of the former schoolhouse. 8 mature and semi-mature exotic trees would be removed. Council officers have assessed the development plan amendment and considered that the proposal does not comply with the Whittlesea planning scheme, particularly with respect to its location and residential context. Additionally, the significant existing landscape and heritage elements of the site have not been sufficiently addressed in the proposal. As such, the report recommends that Council refuse the proposed amendment to the Mayfield Historic Precinct Development Plan on the grounds that the proposal does not align with the strategic planning framework and relevant planning policy of the Whittlesea planning scheme as detailed in the officer report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Martin-Chu. Ms Duncan, do you have any questions relating to this item? No?
No.
I don't have any questions either. We've obviously been well briefed on this particular item, so I'm happy to move the officer recommendation for item 5.2.1. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Ms Duncan. I'm not proposing to speak at length because I think that Ms Martin-Chu provided a very good summary in relation to the recommendation to refuse this particular planning permit. And I think that her comments about the fact that it significantly does not comply with the strategic planning framework at the City of Whittlesea and multiple, whether it's the Whittlesea planning scheme, the Mernda strategy plan, and so forth. So I think there's a very high degree of non-compliance with a number of policies and strategies, including cultural heritage. And I think that it's important to note that there's also inconsistency in relation to the location of childcare centres. It's very useful to have the site plan appended to the report, because I think you've only got to look at the site plan to see that it is an incredibly constrained site as well. So I support the officer recommendation of refusal in relation to this planning application. Ms Duncan?
Thank you, Chair. I agree with everything you've just said, and it is the proposal is contrary to our strategy on childcare centres, which should generally be co-located within other community-based facilities or adjacent to activity centres. And I think the proposed location as well on an arterial road like Plenty Road is really going to present significant issues like vehicle access, parking and pedestrian access. So I support the recommendation as well.
Thank you, Ms Duncan. I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you. Item 5.2.2, elevating ESD targets in the planning scheme. And again, Mr O'Mara, if I could invite you to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. And I would like to introduce Denise Turner, who's our Coordinator of Planning Policy Implementation, who will provide a brief overview of this report and recommendation. Over to you, Denise.
Thank you, Mr O'Mara. Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to present the report on the Stage 1 findings of the Elevating Environmentally Sustainable Development Targets project and seek approval to join Stage 2 of the project to commence the formal planning scheme amendment process. The City of Whittlesea has been collaborating with the Council Alliance for a Sustainable Built Environment, known as CASB, in partnership with 31 other councils across Victoria. Stage 1 builds on Council's existing policy and is seeking revised and elevated targets for new development. An evidence base has been developed and the technical and development feasibility of the draft provisions have been tested, which support improved environmental performance within the Whittlesea planning scheme. Approval is now sought to join Stage 2 of the project to commence a collaborative joint planning scheme amendment with CASB and other participating councils. Specifically, the amendment seeks to introduce a new particular provision at clause 53 of the planning scheme. The provision addresses the key themes of operational design, sustainable transport, integrated water management, indoor environmental quality, circular economy and green infrastructure. Now, it's noted that the provision does not trigger a planning permit, rather it identifies the circumstances where the policy applies and the types of development that are exempt. For example, the requirements do not apply to single dwellings and associated development. There may be some additional upfront costs associated with the new requirements, but this cost is negated by the improved life cycle costs over the life of the buildings, including reduced utility bills. To date, 18 of 31 councils have signed on to join Stage 2 of the project, with a further 6 councils, including the City of Whittlesea, due to decide before the end of June. I put forward the officer recommendation as stated in the report to join Stage 2 of the Elevating Environmentally Sustainable Development project and commence the amendment process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms Turner. I do have a question, and I'll perhaps in the first instance address it to Mr O'Mara and he can refer it to Ms Turner if he wishes. I note the point that there's 31 councils that have previously worked collaboratively in relation to what will be a joint planning scheme amendment. Can you talk a little bit about the exhibition process and also the opportunity for community comment? Is that going to occur at a municipal level, or will it simultaneously occur across all the 31 all participating councils?
Thank you, Chair. And I'll ask Denise to elaborate further on the proposed community engagement approach. Thank you, Denise.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's going to be a combination of both to some extent. Once Council lodges the authorisation request with the Minister for Planning, community awareness raising will be undertaken in accordance with a communications plan that's currently being developed by CASB in consultation with councils, So that'll be a bit of a joint sort of community awareness raising about the amendment. But then the formal community consultation via the exhibition process will occur on a council by council basis in accordance with statutory requirements.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Ms Turner. Ms Duncan, any further questions?
No, thank you, Chair.
All right, well then I'm happy to move the officer recommendation for item 5.2.2. And Ms Duncan, are you happy to second it? Thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to make a couple of very brief comments. I think it's really fantastic that we're collaborating across 31 councils, or however many it will be across Victoria, in relation to this matter, because it certainly builds on best practice in ESD. And I note within the report that there's the review of 15 case studies which will inform our work over time, and also extensive expertise of technical professionals, industry bodies and DELP stakeholders. The officer report indicates that a clear outcome of this work would be a single particular provision which will be replacing numerous existing local ESD policies. So it's clearly important that best practice in this area would see that individual municipalities should not be undertaking this work in isolation, because those issues, whether it's sustainable transport or integrated water management, the circular economy or green infrastructure, those issues don't stop at municipal boundaries. So I really welcome and applaud the collaboration across councils. And I think Ms Turner's clarification about the opportunity for comment by residents and stakeholders when the exhibition process has commenced is also really excellent. So thank you, Ms Turner, for your work on this particular item, and I'll hand over to Ms Duncan for any further comments she might have.
Thank you, Chair. I echo your comments regarding the benefits of collaboration. It's always a good thing to do, and particularly in this instance. And I also think that the proposed joint planning scheme amendment will also offer some cost savings that could be significant compared to if we were undertaking the proposed amendments on our own. So well done, Mr O'Mara and the team.
Thank you, Ms Duncan. I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you, Ms Turner.
Thank you.
Item 5.2.3, 2022 to 24, Kellynack Reserve Park and Playground upgrade. And if I could hand over to the Manager of Sustainable Development, Ms Amanda Dodd. Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you, Chair. This report relates to an important upgrade of the Kellynack Reserve Park and Playground upgrade. I'd like to hand over to Adrian Napoleoni, the Unit Manager of Parks Development, who will speak to the report and the recommendations. Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr Napoleoni.
Good evening, administrators. Thank you. Kellynack Recreation Reserve is located in Mill Park, within the eastern pocket of Plenty Road. The master plan for the reserve was endorsed by Council in early 2021 and included consultation with a broad range of community to understand how they use the reserve currently and how they'd like to see the reserve improved in the future. The award of this construction contract will see the first phase of the master plan implementation, starting with the redevelopment of the playground and social gathering spaces located in the northern part of the reserve. The redevelopment will include 2 new shelters and picnic settings with public furniture and barbecues, a 30-metre long double flying fox, new multi-age deck playground suite with multiple slides, a half-court basketball court and netball ring, outdoor table tennis tables, swing sets, including a large basket swing, nature play elements throughout the whole play space, and the relocation of the popular outdoor fitness equipment. Construction of all-weather paths and improved pedestrian access is also proposed to the Blossom Park Drive road. This project has been successful in receiving $675,000 funding through the state government's Growing Suburbs
Fund program, which we are extremely grateful for. And the construction works is scheduled to commence in August with a completion date earmarked for mid-December 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Napoleoni. Ms. Duncan, do you have any questions?
No, Chair.
Could I then ask whether you are happy to move the officer recommendation for item 5.2.3?
Yes, Chair, I'm happy to move this one.
And I'm happy to second the officer recommendation. Ms. Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. I just think that this is another really important infrastructure project for open space for our community. And we've just heard from Mr. Napoleoni on what some of the things will be at this reserve and the upgrade. And I just think it will be fantastic for the community to be able to have a space like that. So I'm very excited to see how it's going to look when it's opened at the end of the year. And just to also acknowledge the thank you to the state government again for the Growing Suburbs funding of $675,000. That's just fantastic. We can use that money to make this reserve something very special for the community. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Duncan. I just want to make two comments. I echo Ms. Duncan's comments, but the concept plan images look absolutely amazing. This is so exciting. And just again, hearing that August to December timeline, that's really quite extraordinary. So very, very exciting times ahead. Thank you, Mr. Napoleoni. I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you. Item 5.4.1, Environmental Upgrade Agreement Program Implementation Recommendations. And again, if I could invite Ms. Dodd, Manager of Sustainable Environment, to provide some introductory comments.
Thank you, Chair. I'll speak to this report directly. I'm pleased to present the report outlining the Environmental Upgrades Agreement Program, which is a pandemic recovery initiative for the City of Whittlesea. An environmental upgrade agreement is an agreement between a property owner, a lender, and local government that finances upgrades which improve the environmental performance of buildings. Environmental upgrade finance is used to pay for approved upgrades, and then the loan is secured against the rateable land through an environmental upgrade charge, which is declared on the property. Environmental upgrade agreements are enabled by and must reflect the requirements of Section 181H of the Victorian Local Government Act. Under the Act, Council can delegate the CEO to enter into an environmental upgrade agreement with a property owner and declare and levy an environmental upgrade charge on the property. Importantly, projects must deliver a measurable environmental, climate, or sustainability benefit and include things like renewable energy generation, energy or water efficiency, waste reduction, or climate change adaptation. Currently, 42 Victorian councils offer an environmental upgrade program. 41 of those councils utilise the services of Better Building Finance. Better Building Finance provides third-party services to councils. They are currently the only entity offering this service. The officer's report recommends an approach for the implementation of Environmental Upgrade Agreement Program, including that a special charge be the mechanism used to facilitate and track repayments, a Better Building Finance be appointed as a third party to establish, administer and support the program delivery, the proposed internal eligibility criteria, and that Council agrees to delegate the Environmental Upgrade Agreement approvals to the CEO in accordance with the Act. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Dodd. I wonder if I could start off with an initial question. I note within the report, and you have just commented it as well now in your introduction about the charge on the rate notice. Can you just explain how that would work where the business is actually leasing the property?
Thank you, Chair. All agreements involve the owner of the property. So any agreement which had a leaseholder or tenant, they would be subordinate to the agreement with the ultimate owner, and the default would remain the responsibility of the owner in the event that their duty wasn't fulfilled.
So the owner has to sign off on the agreement for it to proceed.
Correct.
Good. Thank you, Ms Dodd. Any further question, Ms Duncan? Look, if you don't have any further questions, I'm happy to move the officer recommendation for item 5.4.1. And Ms Duncan, are you happy to second the officer recommendation?
Yes, seconded, Chair.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments from my perspective. This is a really exciting initiative. And Ms Dodd, I know that when we were briefed, I was really quite surprised to learn that 42 of the 79 Victorian councils already are offering environmental upgrade assessments. So I was not aware that it's so widespread really across Victoria, but it's also a very good thing because obviously there's some learnings that have arisen as a result of those previous agreements that are in place. I think that you highlighted some of the areas which business could use the funds for, and they're really important sustainability initiatives, and you highlighted a number of them. And at this time, when obviously our business sector has been particularly impacted and is recovering from the pandemic, I think it's just a really excellent, opportune time to be entering into some of these agreements. We did focus during our briefings on this subject on that issue of risk for council. And I personally feel quite satisfied that the risks are minimal because as the report indicates, there are very strict eligibility criteria and a very rigorous assessment process. Our role is simply facilitator. There'll be quarterly reporting on all of the agreements. And finally, that issue that you've clarified as well, which is the special charge on the rate notice and the fact that council could initiate legal action to recover any overdue amounts if that was to ever ensue, I think really satisfies for me all of those risk potentials. Ms Duncan, would you like to make any further comments?
Not really, Chair. I think you've summed that up very well, and I think it's just a great initiative to break down barriers of traditionally people not being able to afford to do this or borrow money and things like that. So I think it's a great initiative that I'm proud we're involved in now.
Thank you, Ms Duncan. I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you, Ms Dodd.
Thank you.
Oh, I know that you're going to remain for the next two items as well. So if I could perhaps note that we're going to be considering two items, glass processing and glass collection. And if I could perhaps ask Ms Dodd to make some introductory comments to each of those. So I will introduce item 5.4.2, which is 2021-140B, glass processing, and item 5.4.3, 2021-140B, glass collection, and 2017-75A, landfill waste recycling and green waste curbside collection services. Perhaps just to note that Ms Dodd might make introductory comments about both of these, but it is important that we resolve on each of those items separately. So thank you, Ms Dodd.
Thank you, Chair. The glass processing contract and glass collection contract support Council to take the important next step in delivering our 4-bin collection service, which is required by the Victorian Government's Recycling Victoria, a new economic policy. The implementation of the glass service will also support Council to deliver our Rethinking Waste plan. A separate glass service allows even very small fragments to be recovered. In a mixed recycling bin, commonly these fragments become embedded in other recyclable materials, resulting in both being sent to landfill. Improving the overall quality of collected recycled materials increases its commodity value and facilitates the development of a viable circular economy. I put forward the officer recommendations as listed in the report, which includes the recommendation of 2021-14B that Council accepts the tender submitted by Visy Paper for glass processing, and that the recommendation of 2021-14A that Council accepts the tender of JJ Richards and Sons to cover the glass collection, and that contract number 2017-75A for landfill waste recycling and green curbside services is extended to 30th of June 2028. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dodd. Ms. Duncan, do you have any questions in relation to either one of those items, 5.4.2 or 5.4.3?
Yes, just in relation to item 5.4.2, the glass processing, I note that the two reports relate to contract award for glass processing and glass collection. However, the community consultation process, it raised in regards to the glass recycling, it raised a number of concerns from residents regarding bin storage space and the service model, and also the type of glass that can be recycled. Can you just clarify where we've landed on that, please?
Thank you, Administrator Duncan. Council staff in the Resource Recovery Unit will work with residents who've previously identified their concerns to the glass rollout on an individual basis where we have their contact details. We've identified that certain specific development types are more frequent, the ones that have been providing comments in relation to concerns about the service, in particular multi-unit development sites that have a council curbside service. So what the team will be doing is creating individual tailored approaches to address the specific needs of those medium density sites. And this might include changing the interventions delivered, such as the delivery of shared bins, different bin sizes, targeted education campaigns, and tailored collection options for those sorts of facilities. In addition, the Council's resource recovery staff will continue to work with the community relating to the efficient operation of the 4-bin curbside service on an ongoing basis, addressing residents' concerns about the space for that service and how that works for them.
Okay, thank you. I'm happy to move this, Administrator Wilson.
Thank you, Ms. Duncan. So you're moving the officer recommendation for item 5.4.2?
Yes.
Thank you, and I'm happy to second the officer recommendation. Did you wish to speak any further, Ms. Duncan, to 5.4.2?
No, thank you, Chair.
So I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you. And if we now move on to the second part of the, which is glass collection, item 5.4.3, I take it, Administrator Duncan, you've got no further questions relating to that particular item?
No, I don't, Chair, and I'm happy to move this one as well.
Thank you, and I'm happy to second the officer recommendation for item 5.4.3. Again, Ms. Duncan, do you wish to speak to this item?
No, thanks, Chair.
I'll then put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you, Ms. Dodd.
Thank you.
Item 5.5.1, risk management policy and risk management framework. And Mr. Joyce, again, if I could invite you to introduce this item, or I think you'll probably be introducing Ms. Boyle.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It is my pleasure to introduce Ms. Samantha Boyle, the Unit Manager Governance and Risk, to present this report.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Joyce, and through you, Chair. Council's risk management framework and policy are key documents that form the framework for ensuring decision making is made appropriately across council operations. We have documented the framework to provide a systematic and consistent approach to educated decision making and to manage our risks. Our framework outlines how we identify, analyse, evaluate and treat risks on an everyday basis. The risk management framework has been developed and updated in line with the relevant standard, and most importantly, it includes the views of Council's strategic direction and approach. Council has had a risk management framework in place for a number of years, but this is the first time that we are taking it to Council for resolution. And it is an exciting opportunity for Council's feedback on our risk management approach. It also includes feedback from Council on our appetite for key risk categories, which will help guide Council's decision making and ensure that we make decisions within our appetite or tolerance. We ask for Council to endorse both the risk management policy and the risk management framework to guide our risk management processes.
Thank you, Ms Boyle. Ms Duncan, do you have any questions in relation to this item?
No, Chair.
I don't have any questions either, so I'm happy to move the officer recommendation for item 5.5.1. And Ms Duncan, are you happy to second the item? Thank you. So perhaps just a couple of comments, and obviously not only have we had briefings on this particular really important subject, but also the Audit and Risk Committee has provided some valuable input into the policy and framework, and I'm a member of that particular committee. I think it's important to note that there's a number of revisions to the policy and to the framework that really are cosmetic, but others that are important improvements to further strengthen Council's risk management approach. And I just wanted to note two particular items. Firstly, the embedding of risk culture commitments as critical responsibilities for senior management and staff across the organisation, so that it's not one unit, but staff from right across the organisation who really have that ongoing focus on effective risk management, I think is a really excellent strengthening. And secondly, the development of the risk maturity assessment tool to evaluate risk maturity strategies. So thank you, Ms Boyle, for all of the work that you've undertaken, and obviously with other people at Council, to strengthen our policy and framework, because it is certainly best practice. So I'm very happy to move this item. Ms Duncan, did you wish to say anything further?
No, I think you've summed that up beautifully, Chair.
Thank you. So I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you, Ms Boyle. Item 5.5.2, review of Council delegations to the CEO and members of Council staff. Mr Joyce, again, I presume that Ms Boyle will be providing the introductory comments in relation to this particular item, and I note that Mr O'Mara is also here, obviously, particularly in relation to planning delegations. But Ms Boyle, over to you, unless Mr Joyce wanted to make any further comments.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you. This report summarises some key areas of governance processes to ensure the efficiency and effectiveness of Council decision making through the delegation processes. In summary, the key proposals we have included are increasing the financial delegations of the CEO from $1 million to $2 million. This financial increase has been considered in order to reflect the increasing costs associated with the major projects that are being undertaken and environmental impacts such as from COVID. Secondly, delegating the award of the insurance contracts to the CEO irrespective of their value. Unfortunately for council, the timing of policy and premium terms are dictated by the market with insurance programs, and therefore we receive them very close to the end of the financial year, which can make it quite difficult to get the policies finalised in time for council decision-making processes and by the end of the financial year. This will ensure that we speed up that process and make sure that we have our insurance constant throughout the period. We note that with that, regardless, we will outline and update council on any premiums that we do attain, any policies that we do obtain. The third component of the changes that we are proposing are the changes required under the legislation that are undertaken twice a year, and these are general standard changes to legislation requirements as well as changes with your staff throughout the council. Finally, changes to planning delegations. Now, these are the interesting and exciting changes that we are proposing because they will help us to create more efficient and effective decision making, but also ensure that we have the staff who really understand the processes able to make the decisions. These decisions have been made in line with benchmarking other councils, as well as considering recent Ombudsman investigations and best practice. In undertaking the review that has been completed recently, a number of proposed changes include delegating some of the planning approval from council to council officers for changes such as removal of red gums and consideration of other issues, as well as the final proposed change is to remove the call-in process to align with better practice and also insights from recent Ombudsman investigations and make it clearer across the board as to what the processes are. I take the recommendations as per the report, and thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Boyle. I wonder if I could ask the initial question and if I could direct it to Mr. O'Mara. Ms. Boyle made a number of comments in relation to the proposed planning delegations, but I think it's important, Mr. O'Mara, if you could elaborate a little bit further on the basis of the benchmarking of other councils and what has really guided officer recommendations in relation to planning delegations.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, I'm happy to elaborate further on the review that's been undertaken. There's been quite an extensive review undertaken on our current planning delegations and associated community engagement that we do as part of our planning processes as well. So I'll start with the planning delegations review that was undertaken. So not only did we do benchmarking with a number of other like councils, like-sized councils, but also other councils within our northern region. And what we found was that there were some quite stark differences between our current delegations and those of other councils that have recently reviewed their delegations. For example, the current number of objections trigger is exceptionally low compared to other councils. We couldn't find another council within our region that had a lower one. And even the recommended lifting to 10 is still somewhat low, but we feel that the recommended number of 10 is an appropriate step to take. The other thing that we found in the extensive review was that the basis for a number of the current delegations that are in place, and those requirements no longer exist. So, for example, the river red gum removal delegation was put in place nearly 20 years ago at a time when there were minimal controls over the removal of significant native vegetation like river red gums. But I'm really pleased to say that in the last decade and also more recently in the last several years, we've come a long way in terms of additional controls in the planning scheme, as well as additional policies that recognise and protect river red gums in a much more comprehensive way than what they ever were before. And the same goes for heritage places as well that are protected by heritage overlays. And also extensive work's been done on identifying preferred locations for residential development as well, with a lot of community engagement in input. That's been fairly recent in the last few years. We also separately reviewed our community engagement practices, and that's in line with Council's recently adopted community engagement policy. And as a consequence, we've now formalised some of those practices that we undertake as part of planning permit applications, and also in the strategic planning area too, with planning scheme amendments. So we now have a more consistent approach to how we engage with both applicants and objectors in applications, and also ensuring that we have a very considered and consistent approach to how we engage more broadly in the community with strategic planning projects. And a prime example of that at the moment is our draft green wedge management plan, which is undergoing extensive community engagement. So I hope that covers that that question. Okay.
Excellent, Mr. O'Mara. I think it's really important to have your elaboration on the basis of the recommendations regarding planning delegations. So I think that's really important. Thank you. Ms. Duncan, did you have any further questions?
No, Chair.
All right. Well, if you don't have any further questions, I'm happy to move the officer recommendation for item 5.5.2. And Ms. Duncan, are you happy to second the officer recommendations?
Certainly, Chair.
Thank you. I just feel it's very important to make a number of comments in relation to this particular item and its recommendations. Ms. Boyle highlighted some of the key changes, and I don't think it's necessary for me to comment on some of the recommendations regarding insurance delegations, or even in relation to the multiplicity of cosmetic changes that are reflected within this particular report. But I think it is important to comment on two important changes, which are the financial delegation for goods and services to the CEO, which is proposed to increase from the $1 million to the $2 million. And we've obviously sought out information regarding best practice, and suffice it to say that the recommended increase certainly does reflect the increased monetary value and the complexity of the business, given the size and scale of our municipality and the organisation. So I do support those new financial delegations. And I think it's been really important that Mr. O'Mara highlighted the background to the recommendations regarding planning delegations, because we've clearly spent a lot of time, officers have done a huge amount of work reviewing what is occurring, what is best practice right across the state, undertaking the benchmarking. And we at the administrator level have had a number of briefings with an independent technical expert reviewing industry best practice, recommendations from the recent Ombudsman report, and past audit and risk committee discussions. And obviously we were awaiting the recommendations of the IBAC investigation, which has not yet landed with any specific recommendations. So clearly, as Mr. O'Mara indicated, the basis of the proposed changes to planning delegations are really based on the fact that we've got the comprehensive suite of planning policies and the associated tools. And Mr. O'Mara highlighted the multiplicity of different areas where we have those clear tools and policies. And they provide ample guidance to applicants so that they have certainty, but equally, in turn, our officers have a very clear framework for assessing planning applications. So formal council consideration of planning matters is really now going to be guided by clear threshold criteria in terms, as Mr. O'Mara said, of number of objections plus other specific provisions. So I strongly support the recommended changes to the delegations. Ms. Duncan.
I agree, Chair.
So I take it that I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Joyce and Mr. O'Mara. Item 5.5.3, asset plan and asset management plans. And again, if I invite Ms. Dodd, Manager Sustainable Environment, to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to introduce Jim Carabinas, the Manager of Assets and Facilities, who present the paper and the recommendations. And I just want to note that there's been a fantastic piece of work undertaken by the team with community consultation, and will help protect our assets for many years to come. Over to you, Jim.
Thank you, Ms. Dodd.
Carabinas. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ms. Dodd. It's my privilege to present the Council report on the asset plan and asset management plans. The asset plan and asset management plans outlines Council's commitment to how it will strategically manage its facilities and open space over the next 10 years. Council currently manages approximately 475,000 assets with an estimated value of $3.2 billion. This includes, but it's not limited to, sealed and unsealed roads, footpaths and trails, open space, including playgrounds, sporting ovals and trees, public buildings, drainage pipes and pits, bridges and light poles. The asset plan and its subplans provides Council with a strategic management framework to maintain assets and open spaces to a high standard for the effective delivery of services, and more importantly, to also create opportunities for community connections that positively impacts the health and wellbeing of everyone. The plans also feature commitments to minimise the impacts of climate change, focusing on enhancing tree canopy and building new infrastructure with climate change in mind. Therefore, the plans were developed in consultation with the community to ensure community needs are understood and considered, and assisted in identifying priorities for asset management. The plans were also presented to Council's Audit and Risk Committee with all feedback considered, noting that the nature of the feedback didn't warrant notable change. I'd like to sincerely thank the community and all stakeholders for their feedback. The asset plan has been developed to ensure Council meets its obligation under the Local Government Act 2020, that is, to create an asset plan using a community engagement approach, and for the plan to be endorsed by Council no later than the 30th of June 2022. Finally, the report recommends the acknowledgement of the engagement process undertaken in preparation of the plans and the adoption of the City of Whittlesea Asset Plan 2022, City of Whittlesea Buildings and Facilities Asset Management Plan 2022, City of Whittlesea Parks and Open Space Asset Management Plan 2022, City of Whittlesea Transport Asset Management Plan 2022. Thank you, Chair and Administrators, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Carabinas. Ms. Duncan, any questions?
I have no questions, Chair, and I'd be happy to move this item.
Thank you, Ms. Duncan. I've also got no questions, Mr. Carabinas. Thank you for your presentation. And Ms. Duncan has moved the officer recommendation for item 5.5.3. I'm very happy to second the officer recommendation. Ms. Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you. That was a great summary of what we're doing with the asset plan and asset management plans. We previously did consider the draft plans at the council meeting in April, at which time it was noted that the overarching plan and the individual plans by asset class were very comprehensive, plain English, so it's easy to understand. And it's a very good way to navigate and provide a great blueprint for the responsible asset management into the future. So congratulations to you and all of the team. And I would also like to thank all of those submitters that did take the time to submit. And we had something like 170 individuals who accessed the Engage portal during this time, and 676 views on the Engage Whittlesea site. And then, as you've said, we've had 35 feedback forms. And so thank you to everyone that in the community that did participate, and thank you to the staff as well on what's a fantastic great work and excellent engagement with community. So well done, everybody.
Thank you, Ms Duncan. I would simply echo Ms Duncan's comments. Congratulations. These are really excellent documents. And I'm amazed at the level of community engagement, and having been at a number of the engagement opportunities, such as the South Morang Farmers and Makers Market, it's really fantastic that people have put in their comments. So thank you to the community for their feedback, and thank you to our officers for all of the extensive work on these important plans. So on that note, I will put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you. So now if we could move to item 5.5.4, which is the annual budget 2022-23, adoption and declaration of rates. And if I could hand over to our Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Lloyd, to provide the introduction to this really important item.
Thank you, Chair. And we'll also be joined by Mr. Aaron Gerard, who is our acting CFO, to assist with any questions that you may have. On behalf of the organisation, I am delighted to present to Council the 22-23 annual budget. The budget is $296.92 million, which includes an operating budget of $245.25 million and a capital works program of $51.67 million. It's been drafted over many months on the principles of responsible financial management. This budget invests in new facilities, parks, playgrounds, roads, services for families, young people and our seniors, libraries, animal management and support for our local businesses. It invests in our city's needs today, but also recognises the challenges our growing population will present in the future. We're experiencing unprecedented population growth with an additional 8,000 new residents each year and more than 60 babies born each week, which is forecast to continue. And we're now growing 62% between now and 2040, and that's compared to the state average of 25% in that time. This budget invests in the resources to support that service delivery to respond to that growth. It's challenging to develop a budget that delivers for the residents of today in our established and growth areas, whilst also ensuring that we'll be in a financial position to provide the infrastructure and services the city will also need in the future. We're confident this budget responsibly balances those competing priorities. Some of the highlights from the draft budget for this year included $11.96 million for local roads restoration and resurfacing works, delivery of actions from the investment attraction plan and strong local economy strategy actions, increasing kindergarten spaces to help meet the needs of our growing population, design of the Aboriginal gathering place, investment in local leadership development to ensure our community has the skills to be our next elected officials, continuing to make it easier for residents to interact with council through the ongoing delivery of our Customer First program, creation of a new 10-year Green Wedge management plan, implementation of the Rethinking Waste plan, including, as we heard earlier on, the provision of glass bin recycling services, street light bulb replacement programs, and increasing our tree canopy cover as part of the Greening Whittlesea strategy. Our $52 million capital program focuses on delivering critical new projects and catching up on others that were delayed due to the impacts of COVID. The capital budget excludes the anticipated carry forward of $22 million from 21-22, and when incorporated, the total capital program for 22-23 will be in the region of $73.67 million. Highlights of the capital program include the completion of the Mill Park Basketball Stadium redevelopment and the Mernda Social Support Centre, continue improvements to the Whittlesea Public Gardens, which will include a skate park, rock climbing wall, basketball courts, barbecue and shelter and a car park, constructing a basketball court, shelter and social gathering places and upgraded paths at the western end of the Norris Bank Reserve, commenced the design of the Patterson Drive Community Centre and Kindergarten in Donnybrook, starting the foundational infrastructure for the development of the Quarry Hills precinct, including the drainage and the trails, commencing construction of a new playground, shelters and multipurpose court at Kellinack Reserve, and ongoing programs to upgrade playgrounds and general landscapes across the municipality. We're also preparing a pipeline of shovel-ready future projects and strengthening our advocacy ahead of the Victorian state election to ensure we maximise opportunities to partner with other levels of government for their funding for our critical infrastructure. The development of this budget has been informed by community consultations across our established, developing and rural precincts, with 23 written submissions received during the consultation period earlier this year. As you're aware, a budget submission advisory committee of the council was held on Monday the 6th of June, and that enabled community members to speak to their submissions. The draft budget was amended as a result of the community feedback to include $100,000 for works at the finish line of the Sycamore Recreation Reserve BMX track. Average rates in 22-23 will rise by 1.75%. That's in line with the rate cap set by the Victorian Government. We're also being mindful of the impacts of the pandemic on the cost of living. This budget proposes that Council continues to significantly subsidise waste charges for the next 4 years. There will be an increase of 13.8% in waste charges in 22-23. However, the Victorian Government landfill levy increases by 18.9% in that same period. So again, Council is absorbing some of the state government increases there. This means that the waste charges in the City of Whittlesea will remain significantly less compared to other councils who are facing similar challenges with the requirement to transition to the 4-bin system and the increasing cost of waste disposal. Council's budgeted cash result is $14 million, which we propose to transfer into a newly created regional sports and aquatic fund to help fund the delivery of a future regional state-of-the-art centre to support the entire City of Whittlesea community to lead healthy and active lifestyles. I'd like to acknowledge and thank the many staff and the community that were involved in the creation of the budget. I believe it's a budget that provides the services and facilities that our community needs now and has sound and responsible investment for the future. We look forward to delivering the important services and all these important projects in 22-23 to help deliver your vision, Council, of a place for all. I therefore recommend the budget to Council with the detailed officer recommendations as contained in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lloyd. That was a really comprehensive overview of the budget and some of its key highlights, and I think that was very fitting given it's such an important item on the agenda this evening. I wonder if I could just ask an initial question of you, Mr. Lloyd. We've previously, on a number of occasions, had representations at an administrator level, but equally at officer level from a number of our major events. And I'm particularly referring to the Whittlesea Agricultural Show and the Whittlesea Country Music Festival, but major events in general. I wonder whether you could make some comments about the various cost pressures on major events such as those that have occurred as a result of the pandemic and inability to be able to properly host those events.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Look, certainly all of these events are suffering from escalating costs at the moment, increased costs in hiring in trades and services. Sponsorship is very difficult to come by at the moment as businesses are only just recovering themselves from COVID and the pandemic impacts. Certainly had conversations previously with the Showgrounds Committee and with the Country Music Festival, and both have experienced significant reductions in both sponsorship and those escalating costs. There has been some media in recent weeks regarding the Whittlesea Agricultural Show highlighting that they're struggling to put on a show this year due to these unprecedented, what we hope are short-term costs. We're also seeing that with the smaller events that Council also sponsors as well, that their costs are increasing, and what used to be a very cheap event to put on may now cost that little bit more.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. Ms. Duncan, do you have any further questions?
No, Chair, that was quite extensive from the CEO, so thank you.
Thank you. I'm then happy to move the officer recommendation for item 5.5.4, but I would like to propose some additional recommendations or adjustments to the recommendations which are coming up now on the screen. So there is a new Part 4, which reads, allocates an additional budget allocation of $140,000 to support local community-led event organisers facing increasing costs and continued uncertainty resulting from the pandemic as follows: an additional $20,000 to the Whittlesea Agricultural Show, bringing the total budget allocation for this organisation to $40,000, and B, an additional $20,000 to the Whittlesea Country Music Festival, bringing the total budget allocation for this organisation to $50,000 as per last year, and C, the remaining $100,000 to be made available to community event organisers through an increase to Council's Community Events Grants Program. And given that insertion of number 4, the corresponding required adjustments to number 5, which reads to adopt the budget 2022-23 attachment 2, incorporating additional changes outlined in item 4 above, noting that the budget 2022-23 has been updated in accordance with recommendation 1. Ms. Duncan, are you happy to second the recommendation, the officer recommendation with the amendments?
Yes, Chair, very happy.
Thank you. So again, I would like to just make a few comments, as we've already spoken at length when resolving to place the draft budget on public exhibition at the March Council meeting. And as Mr. Lloyd noted, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but we had 23 written submissions, which was really fantastic, which we considered at our budget submission advisory committee, which was all 3 administrators. And it's important to note that 8 of those submissions specifically related to Sycamore Recreation Reserve BMX track. And again, as per our community plan action plan, there's an excellent summary of all of these submissions, these issues raised, and our committee response to them, which is appended to the council report. 3 residents attended the committee meeting to speak to their submissions, and we thank all of the submitters for doing so. We thank everyone for having put in a written submission, but also the people who chose to come along and speak to their submissions. What's certainly clear to me, and I think Mr. Lloyd has summarised this extremely well, is that we have a great challenge as a council of developing a budget that really properly responds to multiple competing priorities. And I'm referring to the rapidly growing population we have. We've got an enormous municipality geographically. We've got very specific socio-demographics. And it's important that we look after the infrastructure requirements of not just the newly developing areas, but also of our established areas. So we've got to really try to balance the competing priorities. I personally believe that this is a very responsible budget that balances those competing priorities and reflecting our community's priorities as well. I just want to particularly highlight that the Capital Works program has been a reset, and I think that it's important to reflect that we've got some huge issues associated with delivery of the capital program, associated with industry-wide delays, construction, supply issues, price increases, which have emanated as we're now proposing the $100,000 of works at Sycamore Recreation Reserve BMX track, and also the $140,000 additional dollars towards key community events, as noted in the additional recommendation. And there's a number of other recommendations that we've made encouraging submitters to apply for specific grant programs. So just in concluding, again, I want to thank all of the community members that have put in submissions and or engaged in the consultation and engagement process with the development of the draft budget, which we'll be resolving on tonight. And I want to pay my particular thanks to our staff as well. Mr. Gerard, to you leading the team through the whole difficult budget process. If you could please ensure that you pass on the administrator's appreciation for the huge amount of effort that you have put in and your team to the development of this budget. We greatly appreciate all of your endeavours. So thank you. Ms. Duncan.
Well said, Chair. I agree.
Nothing further to add?
No, you've said it all. Thank you. Fantastic.
Thank you, Ms. Duncan. So on that note, I'll put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you again, Mr. Gerard, and thank you, Mr. Lloyd. That moves us to notices of motion, and I note that there are no notices of motion. Administrator Duncan, do you have any items of urgent business?
No, Chair.
So perhaps if we then move on to reports of council representatives and the CEO update, could I perhaps just note at the outset, as Administrator Eddie is not in attendance this evening, he will obviously not be presenting a report at this meeting. However, he has prepared the report and we will be appending his report or inserting it in the minutes as a record of his activities over the past month. So if I could just, I'm not going to go through everything that I have undertaken over the past month. I think I'll just try to focus on a few highlights given the time that we're at. And again, if my full report could perhaps be tabled or inserted in the minutes, and I'll only just do a summary of a few things. I attended the Australian Local Government Women's Association Annual General Meeting and also the City of Whittlesea Audit and Risk Committee meeting, and then I have represented council on all of the key groups that I'm involved with, the Interface Councils Group Forum, the MAV State Council, Yarra Plenty Regional Library Corporation Board meeting, the Business Advisory Panel meeting. And then some other specific highlights were that administrators were also involved with the Ida Hobbit flag raising and our National Volunteer Week celebration. And then because we have been out and about a lot more, we've undertaken a number of site visits of both businesses and community organisations, including Floridia Cheese, Whittlesea Community Connections, Whittlesea Community Farm, Prace, Whittlesea U3A, Layla and District Men's Shed, and we'll be continuing to undertake those weekly site visits, hopefully once we're out of the current self-isolation. I had great pleasure in being part of the Investment Opportunities Breakfast, National Sorry Day, and the opening of the Whittlesea Early Years and Conservation Conference, World Elder Abuse Awareness Day with the Commissioner, Mr. Gerard Mansour. We did the citizenship ceremony with 117 new Australian citizens alongside my colleague, Ms. Duncan. And important to just highlight the Australian Local Government Association National Congress, Administrator Eddie, CEO Mr. Lloyd and myself attended that association congress, and a very important one, not just attending the congress but also having some individual meetings with members of parliament and undertaking some advocacy on behalf of the City of Whittlesea. So I think that's probably enough said. It's been an incredibly busy month. and I will now hand over, unless there's any questions of me, I will now hand over to Ms Duncan for her update as well.
Thank you, Chair. Like you, Chair, we did a lot of those things you've already mentioned together. So I'll just do the highlights reel from my list, which was I attended the Whittlesea Reconciliation Group meeting, National Sorry Day, the National Volunteer Week celebration, which was actually held here at Barry Road, where I'm sitting tonight, which was the community centre, which was great. And I attended the Australian Local Government Women's Association annual conference up in Shepparton, which was great. And then obviously with yourself, the citizenship ceremony with our new 117 Australian citizens in the city of Whittlesea. So congratulations to all those people. I would just like to note that NAIDOC week commences on Sunday, July the 3rd. So not too far off, and so please head to the council website where there will be lots of information around different events and activities that you can participate in. So that's it from me. They're the highlights, Chair, because we've done a lot of the same things together.
Thank you, Ms Duncan. I have no questions of your report. Thank you. And again, I do note that these reports will be documented in the minutes. So if I could now ask Mr Lloyd to provide an update to Council and the community in relation to or any updates he might like to make.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a very long list today, but I'll provide the full report in the agenda and just cover off a couple of items. Just first of all, a quick apology for anyone that normally watches the subtitles. They haven't been working live tonight, but they will be available on the version that we posted straight after the meeting.
Oh, thank you.
On council matters, we launched our It's All Here campaign, which is our Buy It Local campaign, and included $150,000 of incentives for people to get 25% back of any of their eligible purchases across small businesses in the city of Whittlesea. It's gone extremely well. So far, 74% of the rebates have already been claimed. So that as that stands, we've injected just over $700,000 back into the local economy through that incentives campaign. So that's an amazing result, and thank you to the community. And if you've been out for dinner or done something today, get those claims in quick, because there's only about 25% left, and I suspect will run out in the next few days. And just to flag that we're launching our Love Where You Live campaign. So this is a new campaign that we're piloting as part of our new place-based approach in Wollert. This program will run for the duration of July. It's to help build community pride, to strengthen community connection in the new area. So we're focusing on things like community playgroups, e-waste collections, waste education and recycling workshops. We will be out cleaning up in force lots of dumped rubbish that we've been experiencing in that area, educating the community around all the services that we have for dealing with their waste, and also importantly backing that up with enforcement action as well where it's needed. We'll have a National Tree Planting Day event right at the end of that month, as well as a range of a whole load of other activities as well. They'll be announced as the month progresses. I look forward to seeing everyone up in Wollert during that month. That's it for me, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Lloyd. Ms Duncan, did you have any questions of Mr Lloyd?
No, Chair. That's a great update. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. A couple of very important items there, Mr Lloyd, so thank you for that. And as you noted, the rest of the report will be included as part of the minutes. There is no items of confidential business. So that brings us to the end of the council meeting, and therefore I declare the meeting closed at 9:14 p.m. Thank you all.